Good morning, everyone. My name is Hilde Beekman, and we are delighted that you are attending this webinar in such great numbers. This webinar is organized in collaboration between Ceres and Centexbel within the BioCode project supported by VLAIO, the Flemish government. During this 1-hour webinar, we will inform you on the topics of testing, certification, and labeling of biodegradable or bio-based materials. After a short introduction by Ceres to the BioCode project, we have a presentation by Organic Waste Systems, a world-class reference in the testing of biodegradable materials. Then we have a presentation by DENUO, the Belgian Federation of the Waste and Recycling Sector. And we finish our webinar with a presentation by Centexbel about the Curcol project, in which the bio-based colorant curcumin is investigated for its use in biodegradable applications. Before we start, some practical matters. The Zoom session will be recorded, and afterwards you will receive the presentations. Please turn off your camera and mute your microphone, and use the chat function for your questions. After this webinar, all questions will be collected and answered in writing by the speakers and distributed to you all. Thank you. Now let's start the webinar. Joey Bosmans from Ceres will start with an introduction of the BioCode project. He is working as an engineer in the coding lab of Ceres, is involved in various development projects, and is managing the BioCode project at Ceres. Joey, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Hilde, and good morning to all participants. Thank you as well from my side for being here in such high numbers. Let me first give you some background about the program. This webinar is one of the actions of the BioCode Cook project, which is a 3-year funded project started in 2020. The project was initiated by Ceres and Centexbel, Ceres as the expertise center for the technological industry, and Centexbel as the textile competence center. The goal of the BioCode Cook project is to increase the awareness and the introduction and show the potential of bio-based products and coatings and paints in particular. The Cook refers to collective research and collective knowledge transfer, and offers a funded platform to explore the use of bio-based products. The project is followed by an industrial guidance group with different companies representing the entire supply chain, from raw material suppliers to coating formulators, job coders, and end users. Ceres and Centexbel are trying to capture mutual interest to translate into generic cases, starting formulations, and practical demonstrations. Such cases will provide insights and shall inspire companies to start company-specific cases. After the completion of a white paper explaining the options of bio-based products, we have now organized this webinar to introduce the names of bio-based, biodegradable materials and give you some insights on the nomenclature and all the also the way how bio-based products are explained. Regarding to the bio-based Cook project, company-specific cases, you should think about developments of paints using bio-based products, but also pilot runs to explore bio-based composites. Those are the actions that we are now planning in the BioCode Cook project. If you're interested in participating in the BioCode Cook project, please send us an email. You can either join the guidance group meeting or be part of the mailing list. Thanks a lot. Hilde, please introduce the first speaker.
Okay, thank you very much, Joey, for your presentation. Now we have a presentation by Organic Waste Systems about testing and certification of bio-based and biodegradable materials. Astrid van Houten obtained a master degree in bioscience engineering in 2017 at Organic Waste Systems. She started as marketing and sales engineer. Since this year, she leads the marketing and sales team and is responsible for providing customers with tailored advice on biodegradability and compostability testing and certification. Astrid, the floor is yours.
Yes, here it is. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So I will, thank you. I will be discussing bio-based and biodegradable products. I will be mainly talking about testing, certification, and also a bit on the effect of coatings. So first, a short introduction on the company. So OWS is a company that was founded in 1988. So we are a Belgium-based company. And our core business is actually the design and construction of anaerobic digester plants. So where organic waste is treated and biogas is produced. However, we also have a second division, which is a lab division. And within the lab division, we have the subdivision, which is performing all kinds of tests on biodegradability, composting, and ecotoxicity. So we like to call our contract research laboratory a one-stop laboratory for these type of tests, because we actually provide all possible testing in all possible environments, allowing us to quantify the environmental fate of products in all kinds of environments. So we're talking about compost, but also seawater, landfill, etc. The second bullet point is quite important to us. So we are strictly independent, meaning that we do not do any product development. And then we are also very active in standardization. So not only on European or American level, but also worldwide, so ISO level. We've been in this field for over 30 years, so we have a lot of experience. We have tested several samples. So first, a little bit about bio-based and biodegradability. So often terms are used like bioplastic, etc. But what does that actually mean, bioplastic? So we like to use the terms bio-based and biodegradable. Bio-based meaning that it comes from natural resources, but it does not say anything about the end of life or if a product is biodegradable. It's only, so you have bio-based, as you can see here as well. You have bio-based products that are biodegradable, but you also have bio-based products that are non-biodegradable. Good examples are also these plastic bottles, green bottles, they say, and they are often made from natural materials, but they are conventional plastics and therefore actually not biodegradable. On the other hand, you also have petro-based materials that are non-biodegradable, but also petro-based materials that are biodegradable. So there is not really a link between bio-based and biodegradable. In Europe, we have certificates for bio-based products. You can see some examples here below. So you have TÜV Austria has the OK bio-based logo. You also have a DIN geprüft logo from Dinsertco, and also NEN bio-based. So biodegradation is actually the degradation on a biochemical level. So we are really talking about, we need to look at the chemical structure of the product. So it's actually part of the short carbon circle. So you can actually, it's pretty much a bit the opposite, let's say, of photosynthesis. So where organic matter is broken down again. Often claims are made on biodegradation they say, okay, so the molecular weight drops, so there's a loss of molecular weight, or the product visually disappears, so it is biodegradable. This is actually not really a correct way to measure biodegradation, and the only scientific correct parameter is actually the conversion to CO2. So the general opinion would be that complete biodegradation means that 100% of the organic carbon converts to CO2. However, when we look at the biochemical pathway, we see that part of the organic carbon is also used for biomass growth, for the metabolism of the microorganisms. So it is not possible to have 100% conversion to CO2. Approximately the part that is used for this biomass growth is, let's say, 10%. And that is also why the criteria for biodegradability is set at 90% in the latest standards. However, this does not mean that there will be 10% of microplastics. So let's have a look now at some of the managed end-of-life options, which are composting, so industrial and home compostability. If you want to certify or test your product for compostability, then there are actually 4 aspects that would need to be tested. And 2 of these are with regards to environmental safety, while 2 of these are really with regards to the degradation. There is a difference between industrial and home compostability. Basically, the environmental criteria, so the environmental safety tests are the same, but for the degradation testing, there are differences because, of course, industrial temperature, and compostability is you have much higher temperatures there than compared to home compostability. So to tackle the degradation side, there are 2 requirements. So you have biodegradation and also disintegration. So in a disintegration test, we will actually test whether the product fragments over time, so falls apart, and it should be within a certain time frame. This is, of course, linked to thickness, also density, and here as well, coatings also play a role and are important because they can put an extra layer to the product. Also, these, for instance, UV cured inks actually also there is an extra layer, an additional layer, and this, of course, makes it more difficult for the product to disintegrate. And then also there is a requirement to measure the biodegradation. And there we will really measure the CO2 production, and this way we can calculate how much of the organic carbon is actually transferred into CO2. So if you know that your product fragments within a certain time frame and it also biodegrades, then you know that it will degrade in that environment. Here you have a table which explains a bit more biodegradation and disintegration. So to show the difference as well between industrial and home, the pass level is 90% for both tests. However, for industrial, it should be obtained within 6 months, for home within 12 months. Also, the environment is different. As I mentioned, for industrial, we will perform the test at 58 degrees Celsius. For home, we will perform it at 28 degrees Celsius. What is important here as well, for instance, for biodegradation testing, minor components can be exempted from biodegradation testing. And this might be interesting for instance, for additives, for coatings as well, these minor components. The total concentration of these minor components should be below 5%. Also, natural materials can be omitted because we're talking here about natural non-modified materials like natural fibers, because they are natural, so they are considered biodegradable already. For disintegration, we cannot exempt the test for minor components or natural materials because we really need to have a look at the final product. So whether the final product will disintegrate within a certain time period or not. Okay. Then the requirements on toxicity. So first of all, there is a plant toxicity test. We will look at the toxicity, not of the parent compound, but really of the product after it has been composted. So whether there might be toxic residuals, etc. We perform a test with two plant types, barley and cress we use, and for Australia, there's also an additional toxicity requirement, which are the earthworms. And then there's also the last aspect, also regarding the environmental safety, are chemical characteristics. And this might actually also be important for coatings and additives, because the heavy limit concentration, the heavy metal concentration, I mean, of a product cannot exceed certain limits. This is especially important for inks, because inks, they always contain heavy metals, so they're always limited in their maximum usage concentration, and this is so also very important to take into account. Also note that 49%, maximum 49% can be inorganic, because we are making compost. So it is about products that largely contain of organic material. Some of the industrial compostability certificates and logos you can see here. So the most known ones in Europe are you have the seedling logo, and you have the OK Compost logo. And also for home compostability, you have OK Compost Home logo. So these are the most known ones in Europe, but you also have PPI in America, you have a certificate in Australia. So yeah. So now I'm going to talk a bit about in situ biodegradation. So products also leak in other environments. It can be by actually litter, but also due to leaking by actually wear off. So for instance, when we're talking about soil as well, you for instance have mulch films or like applications that are used in the garden, etc. For marine, you also have like fishing nets. You will use it in a marine environment, and eventually there will be some wear off, and part of the material will end up there. So actually biodegradable products in these environments, it should never be a license to litter. So that should be clear. So yeah, here you can see an order of environments, and they are ordered based on their aggressiveness. So it is important to understand that the biodegradability of a product can vary depending on the environment. So there is no extrapolation possible. So as you can see here, compost, industrial compost, is the most aggressive environment, landfill the least aggressive environment. The difference, there are actually two aspects how you can explain the difference in aggressiveness, and one is biology. So bacteria are present in each environment, but bacteria, they actually digest the more easily biodegradable polymers, like we're talking about short chain polymers, we're talking about starch-based and cellulose-based products. On the other hand, you have the fungi, and the fungi, they can actually digest or biodegrade the long chain polymers, the more difficult polymers, but they are only active in compost and soil. And then there's also a second aspect, is the temperature. So industrial compost can go up to 60, 70 degrees Celsius, but all the other environments, they're actually, it's more ambient temperatures. And the higher the temperature, also the higher the biodegradation rate. So this can explain the difference in aggressiveness. So it is important here an important message here is, when you want to make claims on biodegradation in environment, link it to the environment in which it is biodegradable, in which it has been tested. You cannot make claims that if you test, for instance, a product in soil and it is biodegradable in soil, you cannot claim that it will be biodegradable in each environment. So this is important for communication. This is a poster that we actually created with some partners, and the goal is to show actually that the environmental conditions can have an effect on the different materials. So here you see different material groups, and when it's green, for instance, for PBS, when it's green a certain environment, it means that it has been proven to be biodegradable in that environment. So PBS is biodegradable in industrial compost. However, when you see the striped greens, it means that it has been proven for certain grades or for certain conditions, but not for all grades and conditions then. And when it's white, it means that it hasn't been proven to be biodegradable in that environment. So you can see PBS is, for instance, has proven to be biodegradable in industrial compost, PHP in all environments. So it's the environment is really critical for each product.
Even, ik heb nog niet helemaal goed gelezen.
Then, so I'm gonna explain a bit soil now. So there is an European standard on the mulch films or on biodegradability of mulch films specifically. And as you can see, we also have certificates available as well for biodegradability in soil. One of the requirements is, so for soil, there's also an increased attention in environmental safety. For the OK biodegradable soil certificate from TÜV Austria, you need to test plant toxicity. For other certificates, and this is also the requirements for the mulch films, for the European standard on mulch films, there's even additional tests required, like earthworm and microorganism ecotoxicity testing. If for a product, in order to be biodegradable in soil, it needs to obtain the 90% criteria within 2 years. Okay. So then we have freshwater. Probably many of you have heard of the OECD test methods, but they are actually created for pure chemicals only. So when we look at polymers, we have different test methods. There's also a certificate available, which is OK biodegradable water. Here you have, again, the heavy metals and fluorine requirement, the biodegradation requirement, and optionally also a solubility or dispersibility test. We see an increased demand as well for testing flushables, wet wipes in freshwater environment. And for instance, freshwater can also be a good environment for products like these plastic wrap around dishwasher tablets. These products really end up in the freshwater environment. Yeah. And then we also have the marine environment. Here it's a very interesting environment because within the marine environment, you have different sub-environments. You, for instance, have the free open water zone where the product is really on the water in the waves, let's say. But then you also have the sediment, which is a different environment. So there's increased attention in the marine environment, and over the last years, several standards were created, also for several sub-environments, and it's still ongoing. So there's still a lot ongoing as well in the marine environment. The certificate that is available in Europe is the OK biodegradable marine environment. And we see here again, next to, of course, biodegradation, etc., that there's also a requirement on disintegration. So it should actually disappear within a reasonable time frame, which is 3 months for this certificate. Also, aquatic toxicity is important. So then lastly, I would like to talk, just quickly mention some projects on circular economy. So we also participate in European projects like Be on Top, in which Centex, Bell and Ceres are also partners. So here it's the goal is to make packaging, films and textiles. It's PLA based, but tailored PLA with also bio-based coatings and copolymers. And the goal is to make packaging for all kind of applications, but the packaging should be home compostable and also recyclable. So multiple end-of-life solutions. OWS is doing the biodegradation testing and also the life cycle analysis. And then there's also a new project which only started in January of this year, and here it's also about bio-based high performance packaging, but also with a lot of attention on the upcycling. So with delamination of these barrier coatings and of adhesives, also enzymatic recycling to prevent microplastics, etc. So a lot of attention here on the upcycling. So this was my presentation. If you have any questions, always with regards to certification and testing, you can always contact me.
Thank you very much, Astrid, for your very interesting presentation. As we told before, for questions, please use the chat function. After this webinar, we will collect all questions and answer them in writing and distribute them to you all. So thank you. Now we can go to the next presentation. We have a presentation by Inge de Witte from DENUO. DENUO is the Belgian Federation of the Waste and Recycling sector. She will give a presentation about relevance of biologically degradable and compostable plastics in a circular economy. Inge de Witte is plastic recycling consultant at DENUO. Inge, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Hilde, and good morning to everyone. My name is Inge de Witte, and I'm plastic recycling consultant at DENUO. And I try to move on now to the next slide. It might take some time. Okay. DENUO is the Belgian Federation of the Waste and Recycling sector. And our member companies are active in recycling, but also in composting and final treatment of waste. So they are the essential link between used materials and reuse, recycling, and final processing. We have today more than 300 members, representing 14,000 employees and good for sales of 4 billion. What I would like to share with you today is the relevance of bioplastics in a circular economy from a waste management point of view. So bioplastics, what's in the name? Bioplastics is an umbrella name that covers actually different types of plastics. That was already explained by Astrid in the previous presentation. So it's not at all unambiguous. And in line with our objective of achieving a more sustainable environment, it is important to gain insight in how we can achieve that by using different types of bioplastics. We've already seen this chart, but it gives an overview of all the different types of plastics and bioplastics. Bio-based plastics are the so-called bio-sourced plastics, made of renewable resources and not of fossil fuels. But bio-based plastics can also be identical to fossil-based plastics. Think of bio-based PE or bio-based PET, for example. Biodegradable plastics, on the other hand, are plastics that are degradable through the action of naturally occurring microorganisms such as bacteria, fungi, and algae. But biodegradable plastics can also be of petrochemical origin. So as you can see, for consumers and users that are not familiar with this terminology, it's not at all that clear. Especially biodegradable and compostable plastics give often the wrong idea that such material is harmless if littered. And that is not at all true, because as long as the degradation process is not completed, the polymer stays harmful to the environment. So we can say that the use of the term bioplastics gives often a misleading message to the customer or the consumer, who assumes that he is buying an eco or bio product that is fully degradable, which is absolutely not always the case. The presence of bioplastics in the market is growing, and that goes hand in hand by an increasing demand for sustainable products from consumers and brand owners. However, their share at the moment is still very limited. Only 1% of the globally produced plastics are bioplastics. At the moment, Asia is the major producer of bioplastics and accounts for more than 50% of the total production worldwide. But it is estimated that the European market will grow very rapidly and will grow up its share to 30% by 2024. What are bioplastics today mainly used for? According to the European Bioplastic Association, the distribution over the different applications looks as follows. You see as well for bio-based plastics as for biodegradable plastics that they are mainly used today for packaging. The packaging is reflected in the blue and the yellow color. Blue stands for rigid plastics and yellow for flexible plastics. And it's important to keep that in mind. So the presence of bioplastics in the market is growing, and that's together with an increased consumer conscience for sustainability and environmental protection. But is that justified? We need to ask ourselves, what is the role, or what could be the role of bioplastics in a circular economy? And do they really contribute to a circular economy? There are some pitfalls, though, for using biodegradable and compostable plastics. First of all, biodegradable plastics are made to degrade. So it makes sense that they are not fit for mechanical recycling. So they should not be mingled or mixed with conventional plastics that are going to a mechanical recycling solution. As some of our members explained, what you don't want is biodegradable plastics among the plastics to be recycled. They become much stickier than normal plastics during the heating process, which blocks the sieves of the machines and also reduces the quality of the end product. They act as concrete in water, is another comment that I received. So they are disturbing the mechanical recycling process. There is a lack at the moment of a separate and harmonized collection system for bioplastics because, as I explained, they should not be sorted out together with conventional plastics, but they should also not go into the green waste bin. I'll explain you later why not. So the main question we have is, how should we dispose of them? In which bin should they go? Biodegradable or compostable plastics are only degradable under perfect industrial conditions where a high temperature is combined with a certain level of humidity and the presence of oxygen. These circumstances are not met in a natural environment where they are degraded where the degradation process takes sometimes years. Compostable plastics are generally also not wanted by composting plants. They are sieved out and incinerated afterwards. And why is that? Because in most composting plants, the maximum breakdown time is about 3 weeks, where the bioplastics that are brought on the market have a breakdown time that is often much longer. When the bioplastics finally compost, they only release air and water, but no nitrogen and no minerals, for example. So they actually add also no value to the compost. And many think that because there is a standard for compostable packaging, the so-called EN 13432 standard, that standard guarantees that this material will compost under any condition. But this standard is a product norm for packaging and not a waste treatment norm. So it cannot be considered as a guarantee of complete industrial compostability. There's also a lack of appropriate labeling, and that leads to misconceptions and to incorrect disposal. The very fact of labeling products as biodegradable products can have an impact on people's behavior and on their sense of responsibility. And it will finally lead to an increase of littering because these products will remain in the environment for years. Furthermore, people have also the impression that when something is biodegradable, they can just put it in the green waste bin. And as I've explained before, that does not always lead to the most sustainable result. Biodegradable plastics are not a synonym for toxic-free, because as long as the degradation process has not been completed, these polymers remain harmful to the environment. This is an article that was published in the Belgian journal The Standard, and that reflects very well the danger of these type of plastics mixed with, well, treated in composting plants, for example, where the article says that plastic can be found back in compost now. So using resources to make material that ends up in the bio-waste stream is not circular, since the biodegradable and compostable plastics are either sorted out and sent to waste incinerators or are transformed into water and CO2 and leave the loop. Biodegradable and compostable plastics also disrupt a mechanical circular recycling process. So what is then the way forward, and how can bioplastics play their role in the circular economy? There are some recommendations. For bioplastics, of which we know that the production is more environmental friendly, more sustainable than that of fossil-based plastics, it is also necessary to manage their end of life in an efficient manner. And of course, all plastic products must be designed according to the design for recycling principles, which means that their collection and their sorting and recycling must fit in an existing infrastructure. The mechanical recycling of bio-based plastics, as long as they are not biodegradable or compostable, is possible and is circular. So the use of biodegradable or compostable plastics should be limited to specific applications where the degradability is a plus, or to specific monostreams that can be collected and processed separately. So the most effective way to contribute to a circular economy is not only the optimization of material technology, but also to focus on the improvement of plastic reuse and plastic waste management through existing schemes. And for this reason, we encourage producers to create bio-based products that can be recycled. And I think that's something that we have to do together, in cooperation also with the waste management sector. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you very much, Inge, for your interesting presentation. For questions, you all can still use the chat function. Then now we can go to the last speaker of today. The last speaker is Brecht de Metz from Centexbel. He will give a presentation about modified curcumin as biodegradable colorant for inks and packaging materials. Brecht is a research scientist within the group of coating, is managing several research projects and is project manager of the BioCode project in Centexbel. Brecht, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I hope you all see my screen. If this is not the case, just say something.
We don't see your screen on this moment.
Okay, sorry. Check that again. Hopefully this is better.
Yes, okay.
Okay. So thank you already the previous speakers for the introduction to bio-based and biodegradable plastics, but also I would like to pinpoint the need for a neutral look at bio-based and biodegradable plastics, because there's indeed a lot of misunderstanding. And I think the reuse, reduce, recycle is still the preferred route for development. However, there are still a range of products that are too polluted, for example, to be recycled in food packaging, or that are intended to use in soil, like mulching films. And there still is a place for biodegradable plastics as well. And this project, the Kurkol project, handles a bit this type of products, where there is still another difficulty, and that is the existence of additives in these plastics that are often overlooked. And this is one of the first R&D projects that really looks with the main focus at the additives for such products, being biodegradable colorants. And what the project is about is already nicely shown in the pictures on the background. We harvest turmeric roots, which are, and that you can see at the right bottom, a source of curcumin, a very nice color, a yellow color, that will then be used in packaging and ink materials for biodegradable products. If we have a look at these additives, they, as I said, remain often overlooked. So there have been a lot of projects on the bulk material, on biodegradable materials, for example, but then a lot of additives are often used, and they often are a source of not only heavy metals, but also persistent molecules that may stay behind. This is what I like to show in the top right picture. If you have a look at a virgin yarn compared to a recycled yarn, you see it has a gray color. This gray color is because it's a mixture of all kinds of colorants that remain in your product after it has been recycled. In the case of recycled products, for example, a recycled waste bag, this is not a problem. It's just a visual aspect, which is ugly. But in the case of products that go into the compost stream, that really is a problem, because these molecules remain behind. They are difficult to detect, and they also are a source of not only contamination of your compost, but in case of paper recycling, they also go into the water. So there certainly is an existing need for non-persistent biodegradable colorants, and we are investigating this in this project with a focus on packaging, materials, and paper. So how does the flow look like in this project? And I think it's really a nice example of how all aspects of the chain are looked at. And it is subsidized within an Interreg project from Northwest Europe. As you can see, we start with the cultivation of turmeric in local greenhouses. So usually it is a crop grown in Asia, but we investigate whether we can also grow it here. In the second step, we have a look at the extraction and the chemistry we can do with it. The aim is not only to have the yellow color from it, but also modify it to a red colorant and a blue colorant, to which we already succeeded. But also to stabilize the yellow colorant, because those who know curcumin know that it's a very labile color. So it will degrade very fast. So a certain chemical stabilization is required. In the next step, we add the colorant to a bio-based plastic and compounding steps, and we also add stabilizers. The next step is then processing these master batches and colorants into packaging materials and plastics. And of course, in the last and a very important step, we also do all kinds of analysis, which is on the one hand biodegradability, also understanding what components come from these degraded colorants. And we also have a look at the economical analysis and an LCA analysis to see whether these components are truly environmentally friendly or not. I will start with the cultivation. As you can see, the cultivation in greenhouses here is surprisingly good. Our partner Proeftuincentrum Groenteteelt, which is also located close to Ghent in Belgium, has grown them already one season, and they are doing follow-up experiments through the next years. As you can see, after 1 month, you already have the growth of the turmeric. It grows already quite nicely after 3 months to 5 months, where they are really tall, big plants. They also offer very, very nice flowers that are a side revenue for the greenhouses that can also sell them as cutting flower. For the cultivation of turmeric, we look at it as a new crop for the local greenhouse industry, which often has it difficult to have sufficient revenue from traditional crops. And typical aspects that we look at is the yield, as you can see on the top right picture. And you see that the plant can give up to 4 kilograms of roots per plant. So that's already quite a lot. Of course, you have an influence of fertilization, like with mulching or without mulching. We also have a look at how you should harvest it and store it. We have a look at which strains should be used, because not all strains give as much yield, but not necessarily a high yield in weight of rooters means a high concentration of colorant as well. So that certainly are also things we look at. In the next step, we go to extraction and chemistry. As you can see, we extract the yellow colorant and we do chemical modifications with it to also render, for example, a red colorant and a blue one. And the idea after it is that with 3 main colors, we can achieve most colors needed to create all the colors you want. What we look at is an increase of the stability of the dye. As I said, curcumin itself is not a very stable dye, so we need to increase the stability. It has sufficient thermal stability to process into plastics, but notably the UV stability is very low. So we have a look specifically to UV exposure, and then we have a look at the LAB values that show you where on the color diagram you find your type of color. And we look at the change of hue, etc., to see whether chemical stabilizations are indeed contributing to a more stable colorant. We also, of course, have a look at other colors. We always take in mind whether the modifications we do are in fact, and the extractions, of course, as well, are in fact environmentally friendly or not. We also have a look at the influences of extraction. For example, if you boil them, if you dry them, does that influence the quality of the curcumin? Those are certainly important aspects for this part of the project, which is led by Avans Hogeschool, that is also the coordinator of this project. In the next step, we go to compounding and stabilization. As you can see, colorants are usually added to plastics by a master batch. Curcumin comes usually as a powder, we mix it and we have a look whether we have little agglomerates or something like that, that should not happen. And I must say, in our first experiments, we see that curcumin is actually quite suitable for use with biopolymers, and the dispersion of the color is quite good. In the middle picture here on the background, you see that we also have a look at inks, and there we have a look whether the color is very nicely dispersed as well, because that is very important for printing inks, but also coatings. And on the right-hand side, you can see for the moment we still work with virgin non-modified curcumin, and you see after UV aging that this color really fades away very quickly, which is mostly seen as disadvantages, but in the case of recycling, in some cases you want to be able to eliminate the colorant in the recycled product as well, and therefore colorants should not always be as stable in products as they are today, and that certainly is something one can think about in product development. So we look at stabilizing the natural colorants in this step as well, and we use wherever possible natural stabilizers. If you have a look at natural UV absorbers, this is an example of what we do. We add some UV absorbers into tin films. As you can see here, a concentration of a commercial product in 1.3, 2.6 and 4.2%, but also we tested resveratrol, which is a waste product from the wine industry. It occurs in the grape skins. Hesperidine and neohesperidine are waste waste come from the waste stream of oranges, where it is present in the peel, and tannin is harvested from pits and seeds also in the industry. We have a look at the sun protection factor. This is in fact the same factor as you see on your sunscreen. So components that offer grades of, let's say, above 50 are already a good protectant against UV radiation, which will be required with the colorant. Of course, this is not only the only item that matters for color stability. You can also add antioxidants, compatibilizers, stabilizers, UV blockers, and therefore it always is important to also do, as is shown on the bottom, UV stability tests on the final products. And as you can see, discoloration still happens quite a lot and is a problem or a problematic item with natural colorants in general. Then we will go at the end of the project to processing on final packaging material and paper. What you can see again on the background on the left is a paper coating. So that is one aspect. On the middle, you see tapes and films that we will also investigate. And on the right, you see injection molding. As you can see, the project is quite new. So at this stage, we don't have the final prototypes ready yet, but this is certainly something that will come in the future. We process into demonstrators for paper coatings, but also biodegradable printing inks, trays, films, tapes. We look at the concentration of the colorant needed, but we also have a look at the behavior of the colorant in different types of polymers, like PLA, PHA. For example, the ink on this biodegradable film is made from a natural wax in which the colorant is added, and then we do the subsequent or some of the subsequent biodegradability tests as well. At the bottom, you see an injection molding machine because at the moment we don't have such samples ready yet. The last step, which is certainly very important as well, is to have a look at critical sustainability and biodegradability and economic analysis at the end of the project and during the project. What you see at the background is microbial flasks and groats to which curcumin has been added, and then we have a look at different parameters. This is shown at the right bottom scheme. We will incubate curcumin flasks with curcumin in liquid media with bacteria. After a while, we have a look whether there is bacterial growth, but most importantly, we also have a look at the degradation products and what they actually are. Because we did work with modified curcumins, and it certainly is important to also check whether these things biodegrade quickly enough. The importance of LCA studies is something which should always be looked at as well. And a famous example of a colorant, for example, is indigo. Indigo is the blue jeans blue dye, of which it is proven that the synthetic dye is actually better than the bio-based dye, because in bio-based processes, you also need expensive extraction steps, etc. And it is very important to have a look at your total project, whether the total flow is still environmentally friendly or not. So for an LCA study, and that is shown on the top, you look at really a lot of parameters. You look at extraction protocols, you look at the end of life, at the processing, etc. And that is certainly an important aspect to look at. We will do an LCA study on 3 final products. We also will do the biodegradation studies, and a techno-economic analysis will also be done. This will be done by Rubia Natural Colors. And the tasks here in analysis and sustainability will be done by University of Münster and the Aachen Maastricht Institute of Bio-based Materials. If you want to know more about our project, because I think it's a really interesting project that is really inspiring, including all the players from start to finish, please join our webinar. You can find the link here as well, which will be held on the 20th of April. It is also quite a short webinar, so it won't be taking too much of your time. So I can only encourage you to follow this as well. Then I think I pinpointed most of the partners from this project. Delta Q is a specialist in master badges for colorants, and we'll be speaking also on our webinar coming up. Ronneberg Biopolymers is a specialist in biopolymers, and the Athlone Institute of Technology in Ireland is an institute that is also expert in processing of plastics. The project is an Interreg Northwest Europe project, and the Flemish partners got the support by co-financing by the Flemish government. Then I would like to also pinpoint your attention if labeling is something that interests you. We have a masterclass duurzaamheidslabels, so sustainability labels. The masterclass is a full day, will be held on the 8th of June, but is in Dutch. So this is probably an important thing to mention here as well. Then I would like to thank you for joining our webinar today, and I will give the word back to Hilde.
Thank you very much, Brecht, for this very interesting presentation. For questions for Brecht or for the other speakers, you still can use the chat function. After the webinar, all questions will be collected, as I told before, and will be answered in writing by the speakers and distributed to you all. At the end of this webinar, I would like to thank all the speakers for their interesting presentation, and we want to thank you all for your presence. We hope it was interesting for you and hope to see you again next time. If you have more questions about the BioCode project, don't hesitate to contact Brecht or Joey. Thank you all and goodbye. Hope to see you again next time. Thank you.